have a question for all three of you about policing technology, specifically because we're on a panel about rebuilding trust, repairing something that is broken, maybe was never actually functioning the way it was supposed to be. But at the same time, police are finding new, innovative ways to police through technology. And a lot of these technologies, whether through criminalizing specific areas or trying to predict who's most likely to commit a crime in the future, are in a lot of ways reinscribing racial bias into policing via new technologies. So what are all three of you doing to kind of stay on the vanguard of that and make sure that, you know, while we're fighting problems that have been in existence for a long time, what are we doing to like kill these problems that are coming up?
Using technology. Again, if you have a question, raise your hand so the microphone can get to you. Who wants to jump in?
So I'm so glad you asked that question. This is really the brave new world and quite alarming. So face recognition technology, scanning a photograph of the crowd that was standing around a crime and then putting that face recognition into police databases and coming up with who was there. Monitoring social media is a big one that's was used up in New York to do some sweeps in public housing. And then, of course, the predictive algorithms about who is likely to commit a crime. These are really scary ventures that we're actually just trying to get a hold of. We're understanding, first of all, some of the technology. Understanding algorithms is like they're not supposed to be understood, right? And really dealing with the built-in narrative of neutrality that surrounds them, and this concern about embedding implicit bias and in some instances explicit bias into these technological forms of surveillance are a big deal. And so we have a little kind of unit that is actually beginning to explore this right now. First of all, trying to understand the various ways the technology is being used. We don't panic about it. If you drive through Baltimore, there's blue light cameras, in certain neighborhoods just posted up, surveilling the neighborhood at all times. So there've been, surveillance and privacy issues in minority communities for a very long time. But this presents really unique challenges, and for us it presents particularly unique challenges of thinking about how we would litigate in the context of evidence presented from that technology. And that's just something we are in the process of learning and want to learn more about how we're going to engage it as a matter of litigation.
Dre, are you concerned about, the technology and then the creation of lists? We've been talking a lot about the watch list and making sure that, people who are on the watch list shouldn't be able to buy guns. Who's on the watch list? Who are making up those lists? Shall we remember some of the lists that have existed in our country? The black list, the Japanese American list, the Mexican list, the gay list. These are lists, right? And now we have, I'm sorry, the
red list.
The red list. How do we now couple that with the fact that we've got this technology, which everybody seems to think is like the best thing that ever happened to us?
Yeah, so I'll talk about two specifically. One is Stingray. So in Baltimore, they have the Stingray, which can access your cellular devices, and we think that is really problematic. There have been cities across the country in protests where all of a sudden the cell signals have been jammed and you are struggling, right? And we don't think that is good. Like Sherilyn said, though, the technology is so new that we're trying to understand it in a better way. Body cameras is one that people talk about often, and we have publicly said we support body cameras to a certain extent. The hard part about body cameras is if you believe in community policing, which for most people is this idea that the police should be in communities, which we would say, and when we met with Obama, when we met with Valerie and Loretta, we said to them, we think community policing is really like a race-based way of thinking about the police. That if you think about the Upper West Side, nobody's saying the police should just be there high-fiving Timmy when he gets off the bus. But people are saying that in black communities, the police should be everywhere. They should be playing basketball. They should be at the they should just be ever present. And if you believe that and you give every officer a body camera, then you have now created a whole different type of surveillance in neighborhoods. And we think that that is actually really dangerous. What is also real is that the legislation around body cameras was faster than the movement was. So all of a sudden, these cities started passing this legislation, and we just didn't have we were still in the streets getting tear gassed by police departments. So you think about places like DC, where in DC, the officers can look at the footage before they write the police report. We think that defeats the purpose, right? So we are trying to undo some of the damage that's been done with some of those laws, and we also are working with partners around the storage piece. Mm-hmm. So we would love it if the storage was automatically deleted, if it was housed in a place that wasn't managed by the police department. And we would love it if there were ways to make sure that there was like a statute of limitations on what the police could do with it. So we think about places like in St. Louis, during the protests, they would literally just film you. And then they come back like 4 weeks later being like, you threw that rock. And you're like, well, that seems crazy. So we don't think that those things are productive ways to think about body cameras, which is the biggest piece of technology that people talk about.